All right, I think it's time for us to get started in here. Okay, so good morning. Um, I'm the instructor of the class, although we already have one class virtually, really virtually, on Tuesday, because Tuesday was a holiday. So I recorded the class. Hopefully you know where to find them, right? It's in here, in the lessons area of the class, week 1 Tuesday. That's where you find two parts of the recording part number 1, recording part number 2, and that's where we're gonna put our recordings. Okay. This class is CSE 8A, Introductory to Programming. Okay. It's a fundamental class where we learn what coding is and how to get started with basic programming ideas. Okay. The recordings talk about the logistics and everything. I just want to reiterate some of the important components of the class. Okay, so let's look at it. I think the syllabus is at the very end. So this class have a few components. I want to make sure that you are fully aware of it. Number one, our assignment. Our first assignment is already out. It is due this coming Sunday, which is the 9th, right? So by midnight on Sunday, the assignment is due. You submit your assignment on AdStamp in this website, and you can find your PA1 in here, right? So you can see what it does, and also there's this quiz that you should do. Okay. That's the first part, assignment. The second part is the labs. I'm still working on the other labs, but lab 1 already happened on Wednesday. So every week we have a lab other than week 3. In week 3, Wednesday, we're gonna have a midterm. So we're gonna skip the lab for that week. But for this summer session, we're gonna have 4 labs in total. It happens on Wednesday. It's done asynchronously. In other words, you don't have to come to the lab sessions. You just do it by yourself. We do have staff available to answer any questions you may have for the lab on Wednesdays. Okay. So if you look at the calendar that we have, this is CSE 11, but let's see. For 8A, this is what we have. So we do have our labs. So Anju and Jenny, they will be staffing the lab hours next week. So if you need help, hop in. Now for let me see. For the other people, like they have pasted their tutor hours. I think maybe Andrew and Jenny, they forgot to do that. But I will send a reminder to them. So you can see every section, you can click on the Zoom hours. Some of them posted, but some of our staff haven't. So I will remind them again. But this is also includes the tutor hours available. For example, this is today. I think Jenny has her hours in here. Gio also have his hours, and Natia have her hours. So I'll send them a reminder right now before I forgot. But you can go to the hour sections, so the tutor sections, and get help. Okay. Let's see. Everyone, make sure you post your Zoom link on tutor. All right. So I'll remind them. They'll probably put in their hours, but feel free to just pop in if you need help on like today. Okay. I think Nitya probably she will post her Zoom link real soon. Okay. So that's the Wednesday lab EAs, and then on Friday we have our quiz. So every week we have a quiz for week 1, 2, 3, 4. For week 5, we don't have a quiz because Week 5, Saturday would be the final exam. So we're gonna skip the quiz on that week. The quiz will be on grade scope. The quiz is not on at STEM. The grade scope is a site where we're gonna have our midterm, our weekly quizzes, as well as the final. Okay. Every one of us should have been enrolled on grade scope. Okay. So the quiz is timed quiz. Let me show you grade scope. I kind of finished designing, but I'm still trying to test it out. The week 1 quiz, there's a 20-minute. So from the time you start the quiz, you have 20 minutes to finish it up. It's open book, open notes, open um, Python coding environment. But you must do it alone. You are not allowed to search online for any of the materials for the quiz. You cannot collaborate, cannot use any AI tools to help you. Okay, so that's the expectation for the quiz. So pretty much for each week, we have a lab, we have a quiz, lab on Wednesday, quiz on Friday, we have a PA for that week. And then we have 2 lectures, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday. Okay. So tomorrow we have a quiz, so make sure you complete the quiz. Okay. Are there any questions about these logistics? See, there's a message on the chat. Are the quizzes multiple choice? Yes, all the quizzes are multiple choice, similar to the lab quiz. Okay. The quizzes on Griscope probably, I mean, you just have to do it really quick. You know, you cannot say, let me type it in and run it and see what the output is. So make sure that you understand, because it's timed and there are a lot of questions. So make sure you manage your time properly. Okay. Any other questions about the logistics in here? Open notes also apply for other assignments like the quizzes after labs. Yes, the labs are also open book, open notes, open Python coding environment. So is the midterm, so is the final. Right? I think this is the fairest way. How many questions? I would say you'll be busy for 20 minutes. Okay. I can't remember how many questions I have. Like, excuse me, 5 or 6 big questions. Each of the big questions that maybe have 4 or 5 small questions, like 20, 30 questions. So it's a lot. Okay, so make sure, but none of them is tricky. It's like, I'm not asking you to write a piece of code in a small question. Like most of them are like the things that we covered in class, or the things you've been doing in the assignments. So in other words, there won't be surprises. They just have to do it quickly. Okay. Any other questions for logistics? Because we couldn't meet on Tuesday. So I'll be happy to address any questions you may have on logistics. All right. If anything come up, feel free to put it into the chat or unmute yourself and whenever prompted for questions. Okay. So we meet for 5 weeks for the summer session, right? So this is week 1, and then we have week 5. And every time we meet for about 3 hours. Okay. And normally I manage the 3 hours in this way. We meet for 50 minutes, take a break, meet for another 50 minutes, take a break, and then we meet for the last 50 minutes. Sometimes we finish a little bit early, sometimes we finish a bit behind. Either way, so we meet about 3 hours a day, okay, twice a week. So we'll start at 11. The first break time is 11:50. So we can get up, get some water, and then come back in 10 minutes, and then have the other sections. Okay. If there are no other questions, we're gonna get started in here. Right. So on Tuesday in the recording, we talk about basic variables, typecasting, and the functions. So what we'll be looking at today is we'll be looking at conditionals like if-else statements, how to manipulate strings, and how to manipulate lists in Python. Okay. Let's get started in here. So first, when we think about conditionals are like questions you can ask in your program. Normally, your program runs one statement after another, but sometimes you say, "Oh, if this happens, you do something. Otherwise, you do something else." So basically, your program can write out. Your program can ask a question on certain things, and depending on the outcome, your program would behave differently. Okay. In order for you to ask questions, you must understand Boolean operations. Okay, Boolean is binary, 0 and 1, true or false. Okay, so there are different operators for Boolean. There's not, there's and, there's or. Okay, so for these operators, for example, not is the opposite. So if you say not true, this would give you a false. If you say not false, this would give you a true. That's what we have. Okay. So it's just opposite logic. You say, well, when do I need to use opposite logic? You can say, oh, if it's not raining today, I'm gonna wear a sweater. If it else, I'll bring a raincoat or something, right? So not raining. So you can use the not operation. So you just type in word not. And then for and is used to combine two things. So it's or. So you say A and B. It means if both A and B are true, the whole thing will be true. Otherwise, the expression will give you a false. So this one is when A is true, B is true, whole thing is true. Else it's going to be false. Okay. For or, A or B, what this operation really does is to say, if A and B, if one of them is true, the whole thing is true. But when A is false, B is false, the whole thing is false. Otherwise, it's true. Okay. So they have their usage, right? For example, when do I need to use and? So I say I have a scholarship, right? So the scholarship is given to students who are CSE major and their GPA is about 3.5. If that's the situation, you say CSE major is one condition and GPA is bigger than 3.5. Right, so both of them are true. It means the student will be eligible for the scholarship. That's and. How about or? So, okay, I'm when you all graduate, you may say I will get a car, right? So I'll get a Tesla. I think Tesla is getting cheaper nowadays. A lot of my friends got Tesla. I don't have one yet. But if you look at it, I'll get a car. And when you are a fresh graduate, a lot of times those dealers, they will give you a discount. I say, okay, so when do I have a discount on the car? I say, if you are a fresh graduate from college, or you say, I serve in the military, you get $1,000 discount, right? Fresh graduate or military, you don't have to be both. If you are both, definitely you'll get the discount. You only need one of them to be true for the whole thing to be true. So logically, you sometimes use and, sometimes use or, and not is only used on one condition. Okay. There's also this order. What does mean order? It means if these operators appear in the same expression, not is done first, and then and then or. That's the order, okay? But you can definitely avoid memorizing which one is first, which one is second, by simply parameterizing your expressions properly. Okay. Questions about not, and then or logic here. All right. Now let's look at this example. I have num equals to 12, and this is the condition. Is this true or false? Okay. So I'll ask you to vote in here. You can vote in whenever you're ready. Okay. What would you say the answer is? Is this expression true or false? All right, so the votes are in. A lot of us said B. A lot of us said B. Let's check, right? So the first thing, is this true or false? So as you can see, you have three parentheses, right? So, and you have the not. So, sorry, there's no not. There's this doesn't equal to. Num doesn't equal to 12. This is false. And for AND operation, if the first part is false, definitely the whole thing would be false. So I don't even care about this thing. Num is bigger than 0. I don't care. The whole thing would be false. Here. So this part is false. And then you have an or. The left side is false. I do have to look at the right side of or. Right? Num mod 2. Mod means remainder, right? So if I use 12 divided by 2, is a remainder 1? The answer is no, right? So 12 mod 2, the answer is 0, because 12 divided by 2, the remainder will be 0. So this is also false. False or false, the whole thing will be false. B is the right answer. Okay. Any questions about this? All right. So this is first logic. How about this one? If I don't parenthesize it, what's gonna happen? If there is no parenthesis, which looks scary, I would say. It's just you have to think about what's the value of this expression. Let's vote in, please. Is this true or false? I think we don't agree with each other here now. Feels like we don't have a strong consensus with 60% of the vote in. right? We'll stop the vote. If you look at the vote, A, B, D, people say, oh, well, are there errors? There are no errors. I don't think there are errors. Okay, so you have not, you have or, you have and. Because we didn't parenthesize our expression, in other words, we didn't group the operands with the operator. So basically, well, maybe there's an error. Maybe there's an error. Okay, so if you look at it, not has a higher precedence compared with and or. So if you look at it, it's parenthesized like this, not. And then you have the or operation, but in fact, this is how and would be parenthesized here. And then you say this thing or that thing. So not number equals to 17. Number is the same as 17. So this is true. Not is going to become false. How about this one? This part is true. Num mod 2 is the same as num divided by 2. This is interior division, so it's true. True and true equals to true. False or true should give us a true. Okay. So the answer is A, but only about 30% of us. Let's verify it. Okay. So in the lessons, you can run your code in the terminal. Okay. You can say Python. You can write it in here too. So say num equals to 17. So I want to print this out. So I want to print not num is the same as 17 or num is greater than or equal to 17 and num divided by 2 is the same as 8, right? So if you click on, if you run this code, say Python exercise 2.py, it's going to give you a true. It's going to give you a true. And this is kind of a little bit counterintuitive compared with what we have, right? Because if you don't parameterize it, you may think, oh, it's this whole thing, then take the not. And that's not what we are looking for. So just be careful. Rule of thumb to avoid any confusion is just parameterize it. If you say, I want to do not first, then do the not. And then say, I want to do or next. Just parameterize it properly. And then in the end, I will do and. If you do that, you may get a different answer. Still true. So I happen to be still true. But the way that these things are evaluated may be different. Okay. So avoid relying on kind of the order precedence, just parameterize things properly. Any questions about this exercise? There is a question. Is there a difference between using double equal and single equal? Okay. Double equal means comparison. So you are saying, is the left side and right side, are they the same? That's double equal. Single equal means give a value from the right side to the left side. That's what it means. So for example, if I print num, say num equals to 17, right? And I say, let me print num is the same as 18. This would give me a false. Submit. I think if I run it, you're gonna see a false, right? So it's gonna say, oh, this is false because it's comparing number with 18. But if I change this equals to 18, it's gonna basically no, you're gonna have to print out this expression. Num is not num equals to 18. This part is doing the assignment. So if you do this thing, num will be 18 now. Okay, so if you run it, you're going to print out 18. This is to give this value to that variable. So single equal is more like an arrow that goes from right side to left side. Double equal is comparison. Any questions about this? Any other questions about these logical operations? Okay. Now, once we know Boolean, you can use Boolean conditions to give you operations on if else, right? So if is a condition to say, if this is true, if this Boolean expression is true, you run the code for this if. Otherwise, you run the else part. So if else is like a question you ask, and depending on the outcome, if it's true, the if part will be run. Otherwise, the else part will be run. There are a few syntax you have to pay attention. Number one, there's a colon in here for if. There is also a colon for else. The second thing is else doesn't have a condition. Else by itself doesn't have a condition because the condition for else is the exact opposite of if. So you should omit the condition for else. There's no condition for else. If you have a condition for else, you're going to see an error. Okay. Now, if I have this code, this is a function, I'm calling this function, and I'm passing in the argument as -42. What will be printed out here? Let's vote in, please. Vote in. Okay. We'll stop the vote in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I think the consensus is B. It's going to give me a 42. Why is this the case? I think that's the right answer here. So 42. So you pass in -42 to this n. So n is -42. And this condition is true, right? So if n is less than 0 is true, then I return this thing n times -1. -42 times -1 is 42. So to return that 42, when you print it out, you can see a 42. There's no problem on this. Any questions about this if else statement in here? People rarely have issues with if else because logically it kind of makes sense for human. You know? How about this one? I'm nesting if else, right? So there's an if statement, and then the body of this if contains another if else. As you can see, alignments are used to say which part is the body of if, which part is the body of else, right? If n equals 8, what would you expect to see here? Vote in, please. N is 8. Okay. All right. I don't think we need to continue to vote for this one. At least looks like a majority of us are voting for B, right? So I think the answer is right? So n mod 2 is the same as 0. This is true. Mod 2 means is mod 2 equals to 0 means is num a multiple of 2. The answer is yes. Now, mod 3 equals to 0 means is num a multiple of 3. That's false. So this part will be run. So it's divisible by 2, but not 3. Okay. I don't think we need to vote on this one. It should be good. Okay. What percentage sign? So there's a question what percentage sign is. Percentage sign is a mathematical operator. It says if you have A mod B, it gives the remainder of A divided by B. So if you think about integer division, like 7 divided by 2, if you do the math like in elementary school, right? We rarely do remainder after elementary school. So 7 divided by 2, the remainder would be 1, right? The quotient will be 3. The quotient will be 3, and then the remainder. So it gives you this thing. That's what it gives you. And we use mod operator to help us. It's a very useful operator. So when do I need to use mod? For one thing, we want to check, is this thing a multiple of 2? Is this thing a multiple of 3? Is this thing a multiple of 27? How do I do it, right? For humans, if I ask you, hey, well, is this, how do you tell if a number is a multiple of 27? You probably would say, oh, how do you tell? Is there a mathematical way? You may say, oh, I can design a formula to say if the number follows the formula, then it's a multiple of 27. But in coding, all I need to do is to test if this number mod 27 is the same as 0. That's one way for you to think about it, right? So mod operator in this class, at least right now, is like remainder to test if one number is a multiple of the other. A more useful approach to use mod that I didn't get the time to talk about, but since the question is raised, you can kind of wrap things around, right? So for example, in like for example, if you think about a situation like this, okay? If you look at Ferris wheel, right? If you look at Ferris wheel, you may have all these carts, right? This is a very bad drawing, but you get the idea, right? So if a Ferris wheel, you have different carts. This is cart number, for example, if you start from 1, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hey, exactly 12. So you say, okay, starting from 1, and then the next Ferris wheel is 2. If the Ferris wheel rotates this way, once you see 12, the next Ferris wheel you see is 1, right? So how do I do this? It's like you just, if right now you are at Ferris wheel X, the next Ferris wheel is X plus 1, right? Whatever it is. But it's not always the case, right? If X is 12, the next thing should be 1. It's not 13. Does that make sense? So how do I say I start from X, the next thing would be what? So you can do this. If right now you have X, the next Ferris wheel would be X mod 12 plus 1. So if X is 7, for example, if X is 7, the next thing will be 7 mod 12 plus 1. 7 mod 12 is 7. 7 plus 1 is 8. So it works perfect. But what if X is 12? If you think about it, 12 mod 12 plus 1, 12 mod 12 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. So it kind of allows you to wrap around, which is a very useful operation, you know, mod operation is not the fastest operation, but it can kind of give you some very interesting mathematical properties. You don't have to worry about this, at least for now, right? But you should know it's a remainder. Any other questions in here? All right. Now there is if, else, right? There's also this variation called if, else, if, else, if. So what this let me explain what this one does. You might have if condition statements A and then L if. This stands for else if, and then together. So the else part is optional. You can have a standalone if without any problem. You have a if, else, if, else, if without else. So else part is always optional. Now, for this if, else, if, else part, the first thing you have to realize is this whole thing is a single block. They're together. They're together. So the way that Python would evaluate this code is going to look at this condition. If this condition is true, you're going to run the statements here, and then you finish the whole thing. You are done with the whole thing. You don't even look at B, C, or D. But if the first thing is false, you're going to look at condition B. If this condition is true, you're going to execute this part and then skip the rest. You're done with the whole block. But if this thing is false, you look at the third thing. If the third thing is also false, this else part is a catch-all here. Okay. So that's kind of what we have in here. Any questions? Now, what is true about these two blocks, A, B, C, D, E? Can you vote in, given the explanation of if, else, if, else, if? Okay. Vote in, please. Okay, so which one is true? All right. So wow, look at this. Look at this. We have a tie between B, C, and D. Okay, so roughly speaking, we disagree with each other a lot. At least we didn't vote for A or E, so that's what we agree upon. Number one, A is incorrect, right? So that's different. For this block, it is impossible that A and D are both executed, A and D. So I can only execute A if this condition is true. If this condition is true, the rest will be skipped. So B is correct. B is correct. So A and D can never run together. Similarly, A, B. So A, B, C, D, they can only one of them would run. Only one of them would run. How about this one? For block 2, A and D can never happen at the same time. That is false. So this if by itself is an if statement. This is another if. These two are together. In other words, you have two independent ifs and if else block in here. So the way that you can think about it, if this condition is true, I will execute this part. And if this C is false, I would execute this D. So in other words, A and D, they are not even associated with each other. So it's possible they may happen together. The C is incorrect. So only B is the right answer here. Not more than one. Questions? Are there any questions? Then maybe I'll follow up with some questions. A true, B false. Okay. So can I say this? Can I say this? I'll make a statement. A and C can happen at the same time in block 2. A and C can happen at the same time. Can you vote in? If you think it's true, A and C can happen at the same time, vote for A. Otherwise, vote for B. So statements A, statement C can happen at the same time. Is that true or false? No, the recording from 11 is done. All right. So keep voting in, please. I think we still disagree with each other quite a bit on this one. So we'll stop the vote. 2/3 of us got it. 1/3 of us haven't got it yet. So is it possible A and C, they both run? The answer is yes, because this A and this C, they are totally independent from each other, unlike from block 1. Okay, so the answer would be true. The answer would be true. Is it like what? I'll give you one example. Hopefully this makes sense. If I say num equals to 10, I say if, so I'm trying to write the block. This is like A, right? If num is the same as 10, I'll print A runs, this statement A, and then if num doesn't equal to 10, I'll print B runs, right? And then I say if A and C can both run, so if I say if num mod 2 is the same as 0, I'll print C runs, else I'll print D runs. If I run this code, this part would run, so is this part. So both A and C can run. So let me, Python exercise 2.py. You're gonna see A runs and C runs. Both A and C can run. Similarly, both A and B can run at the same time. Just depends on the condition. So you can design the condition such that A and B, A and C, A and D, B and C, B and D, they can both run. It's impossible that both C and D will run. That's impossible. But if you change this if into an else if, you change this if into an else if, now they are all together. They're forming a block. Then this whole thing, at any given time, only A, B, or C, or D run. No two statements can run at the same time. Okay. What does exclamation mark mean? Exclamation mark means not equal to. So this means doesn't equal to 10. That's what it means in here. Any other questions? So this is the if else or conditional statements. Okay. Any other questions about this exercise? All right. So let's do an exercise in here. So I have this code and I will give you some time to write it. And here is the, let me see, lesson Tuesday mystery. Okay, so I want you to write a function. This is the link to the problem. I've sent it into the Zoom chat. You can write it. So write a function that takes a number, a float as the input, and output and print 0, 1, -1 or 2. So just write this function call this mystery function, and then call the function a few times. If you are done writing the function, give me a vote. Okay, so I know how many of you are done. I'll give you 4 minutes. Okay, so try to do it. And then in a few minutes, we're gonna take a break. One of you is done. Okay, good. That's quick. But no rush. Okay, we'll keep working on it. Only one of us is done. I'll give you a few more minutes. So write this function, call it. Okay, and if you are done, give me a vote. So I know how many of us. You can vote for any choice. Doesn't matter which choice you vote. All these exercises are just for practice. You're not graded on them. Okay. Two of us are done. Um, due to time, let's work on this together, and then we're gonna take a break. Okay. So we'll define this function, call this mystery, whatever the name is, and this one will take a number, and this is a float, right? So can be anything. If the number is a multiple of 2, if non-mod 2 is a multiple of 2, I would print 0. Else if it's a multiple of 3, I'll print 1. Else if the number is a multiple of 5, I'll print -1. And then else I'll print 2. And that's it. Right? So I'll call mystery, like for example, 40. If I run this code, in here, it's gonna print out 0 because 40, this is the first thing I see. Right? So if I don't use else if I use a if, then I may not be able to see just 0. In fact, 40 is also multiple of 5, so I will see 0 minus 1. If this is the case, right? 0, -1. So you got to be careful. The logic sometimes matter. Okay, so you got to make sure that do you want to check these conditions independently, or do you want to say one condition is good, then I skip the rest? So if you say I only look for one condition, then you use if else if, But if you say I want to check all of them, then you should use independent ifs. One question is, can I use return? You can use return. In here, I think it asks you to print. So that's why I use print, but you can definitely say return 0, return 1, return -1. That's fine if you are not asked to print. Okay. Any questions about this? All right. So I think it's time for us to take a break right now. So it's now 11:51. We'll come back at 12:01. Okay. So take a break and then I will answer the questions in the chat. Okay. All right. Break time. Break time. All right, so everyone, come back. We'll get started now for the second session. So altogether, we meet for 3 sections. We're done with the first one. There are a few questions in here that I want to address. Number one, do we have to do float number? Like this number is a float. I think if you pass in a float, it should work. But really, if you have a float, then the remainder would not be 0. Like it, when you do the discounted remainder, there will never be 0. So I probably should say this one as an int, right? Int makes more sense. Okay. So I would say you don't need to typecast this num into a float. Let me update it a little bit. So it should be an int. Right, that makes more sense. Now, the second thing, what's the difference between print and the return? In the video recording on Tuesday, I talk about it a bit. So print is to display, just to display it. But return means give back. Okay. So if I change this into return 0, for example, this is return 1, and this is return -1. This is return 2. If this is the case, the value is given back to the function. And when you run your code, you are not going to see anything. So nothing will be printed out. You can decide to print out the return value in here. That's fine. Okay. So that's kind of the major difference between print and return. Return is more popular than print because I call a function, I'm expecting something. And whatever I expect will be given back to me, and I can decide to say, I want to print it out, I want to do something else with it. Okay. If we print 0, do we print the float? Oh, print 0, 0 is an int. 0.0 is a float. Okay. Next one, when should we use the indentation block? When you have the, like, for example, you are in a function. In other words, whenever you see a column, the things that belongs to that column block should be indented. You have this if statement and it has a colon, then this part of the if should be indented. That's how you should indent. And when you press colon, you press enter. In fact, Python is the IDE, the environment would automatically indent it for you. You don't have to press tabs. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So that's the first exercise. We have another exercise, in fact. Let's see. The second exercise is, I think, why is it always saying float? Oh, this one, float makes sense. Okay. So can you all work on this exercise? So given the number, right, the function takes a number. If the number is 0, returns 0. If the number is positive, return 1. If the number is negative, return -1. As you are working on it, give me a vote once you are done with this exercise. You can see the link to the exercise in the Zoom chat. The question is, what would happen if we do not indent? If you do not indent, a lot of times you're going to see errors. It's not just for organization. Well, it's not just for looks. It, Python relies on indentation to say which part belongs to which segment of the code. I'll give you one example in a little bit, right? So, but as of now, try to work on this exercise. Yeah. So write this function in the @stem environment, and then give me a vote once you're done. Okay. And in here you should use return. You use return. Okay. And make sure you're able to call. You're able to call the function to test it out. Okay. All right, 6 of us are done. Okay. In 1 or 2 minutes, I'll get started in here. All right. So let's write this program together. So define, I call this sign, and takes a number, colon, okay? If num is bigger than 0, return 1. Else if num is less than 0, return -1. Else or return 0. That's it. That's the function. Okay. So in this example, because these conditions are already mutually exclusive from each other, you can use if, but I mean, using else if makes more sense because at any given time, only one of them would happen, right? Any questions about this exercise in here? Now, something about indentation, right? Does indentation matter? It does. So let's for example, let me show you. Okay. So I would say num equals to 5. I'll say if num is bigger than 5, bigger than 0, I'll print, for example, positive. And then what if I say print here? If you look at this indentation, this part is indented. It basically tells Python this part belongs to this if. So if runs, you should run this part. This part is not indented. It means it's not part of that if. So this part would always run. For example, if I say number equals to 5 and then I run the code, you're gonna see Python code.py. You're gonna see positive here. But if num is negative, then this part would not run. But here is still here. You can see it in here. So hopefully this would give you the sense of how important indentation is for Python. I personally is not a big fan of this. It's annoying. Sometimes the indentation get messed up, but it is what it is. Okay. So indentation is not just for looks. Any other questions? Okay. Now, the next big topic for today is strings. And then we have some time for lists. Okay. So for strings, it's a very useful tool, right? So you can say string equals to CSE-8A, and then Java, Python, C++, all the languages give you the capability to look at the individual characters in this string. You basically give these characters a location. We call that the index. Okay. So the first letter has the index of 0. Why is it 0, right? Which is counterintuitive. In fact, index does not tell you just the simple location. It tells you how far away are you from the beginning of the string. So if you look at this one, how far away is it from the beginning? It is already the beginning. So the distance is 0. So this index basically is kind of real meaning is the distance from this location to the beginning. That's why it starts from 0. So C has a 0 index, 1 is 1 index, E has an index of 2, all the way to A. A has an index of 5. Okay. So you can use square bracket for you to access individual characters in the string. So for example, if you say name square bracket 2, this would give you a E, letter E. All right. Any questions about this? You can also say name 5. This would give me a A. You can also try to say name 100. What's going to happen? If you say the character at the 100th index location, this one would in fact give you error because it doesn't exist. So in general, this is called index out of range or index out of bounds. Okay. Now, there is a question, why are we using square bracket instead of parenthesis? Parenthesis is for function calls. You're calling a function, that's when you use parenthesis. Like when you call print, this is a function call to use parenthesis. In here, square bracket, it means you are trying to look into the index. So whenever you try to do indexing, you use square bracket. When you try to call function, use parenthesis. Okay. In other words, these are not function calls. Okay, these are not function calls. Any questions about this? So this is called indexing. Just give you one position. And a lot of times that's enough. That's enough. Python also give you something called slicing. Slicing are kind of described in here. So you have A column B in the format of like starting to end. It basically means you want to grab a substring. You want to grab a substring in here. So going from location A to location B, but not including location B. Okay. So if you say going from 3 to 7, it means starting from 3 and then go to 4, 5, 6, but not including 7. You stop right before that. So this would grab all the characters in this range. If you omit the last, like the ending point, it assumes it goes all the way to the end of the string. If you omit the beginning, it assumes you go from the very beginning of the string. That's called slicing. Slicing can give you one position, can give you multiple positions, right? So the other thing about slicing is slicing would not give you errors. So no error on out of range. That's one of the benefit of slicing, but the bad thing about slicing is slow. Okay, so Python in general is a very slow language compared with other languages. But slicing just kind of is a bad operation to start with. Okay. Are there any questions? All right. Let me give you some examples in here. Okay. So this is a list of functions. I'll just use this one. Okay. So I say, okay, I say name equals to CSE-8A, right? I say print name 0. This one would print out C. This one would print out C. Right, let me see. Why does it only have submit? Should have a run. Interesting. So where's the run button? Only has submit. Let me see. I think there are some changes in here. We don't need to submit. We don't need. Just click on run. Yeah, let me see if this one would make it work now. Doesn't seem to allow me to run anymore. Yeah, I can't seem to find the run button. Terminal and run. This one would hopefully give me the run option. Yeah, I just don't see the run option in here. It used to have the run option, but I think there are some changes in here. So I would just run it using my command. So if I say python code.py, the first letter will be C. If you want to know the last character in here is location 6, right? If I now run it, it's going to, is it location 6? No, sorry, location 5. So if I run it, then it's going to give me A. So this is indexing, right? Indexing is pretty straightforward. Just be careful you don't want to go out of bound like what you see here. The other thing that you can do is slicing. So, okay, go from 0 to 4. What does it mean? It means location going from location 0, including location 0, all the way to location 4, but not including location 4. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to be CSE dash 8 is at the location 4, so it's not included. If I now run this, it's going to be CSE dash. Okay. If you say I want to go from location 2 all the way to the end, you can omit that. So this would give me I think E-8A. If you say give me everything before location 3, then you can omit the beginning. It's assuming from going from the very beginning all the way to location 3, but not including location 3. I think location 3 is this dash, so it's gonna just print out CSE. If you look at it in here. Any questions about indexing or slicing? Slicing won't give you errors. For example, you say, hey, go all the way to 100. What's going to happen? Nothing would happen. You just print out the whole string. You're not going to see any errors. So even if your index is totally strange, slicing would not give you error. Okay. Any questions about this part? All right. So that's the first part. That's the first part. Now let's do some exercise. I have CSE-8A, and this is what I'm trying. Oh, sorry. Before we move on, negative index. Let me talk about negative index a little bit. We have indexes go from left to right is 0 to length -1 as the index. Python also allows you to have negative index. So the last character has the index for -1. This is -2 all the way to -6. The reason why the negative index doesn't go from 0 is you already have index 0, so you do not want to have two locations have the same index. So that's why the index goes from -1. And then as you go from right to the left, you are kind of making the negative index is smaller and smaller. Okay, that's what it is. Can you figure out what will be printed out in here? Okay. So vote in whenever you're ready. Okay. All right, vote in. All right, we'll stop the vote in here. A lot of us said C. Let's check. Right. So first thing, 2 to the end, location 2 all the way to the end. So I'm going to see E-8A. That's kind of look like A or C are right. And then from -2 to the end. When you see a negative index in here, what Python really does is to use -2 plus the length of the string to try to convert it into positive index. So -2 plus length would give me the length is 6, -2 plus 6 is 4. We're starting from here all the way to the end, which is going to the right. So it's 8A. So A and C, they are both right. Now the last thing is 1 to -1. Going from 1 to -1, this -1 again is converted into a positive value. So it's -1 plus 6, which is 5. So it's going from 1 to 5, but not including 5. So it should be SE-8. C is the right answer, indeed. Okay. So whenever there's this negative index involved, things can get a little bit tricky in here. Any questions about this? Let's see. So if there are no questions, let me show you a few more things. Okay. So CSE-8A, the indexes are like this, right? So index is like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And also the negative indexes are -6 all the way to this is -1 in there. So just be careful when you have negative indexes. Like for example, I say going from 0 to -100. How does this work? If you have -100 in here, Python will try to convert this into positive. But if you look at it, -100, you add the length, it's not going to give you a positive value, right? So if you look at that, it's just nothing. Nothing will be printed out because if you have -100, add 6 to it, it's -94. So going from 0 to -94, there's no such a thing. So it's going to fail. But if this is -1, this one would work because -1 plus 6 will give you 5. So it's going to be CSE dash 8. Okay. So this is the negative index. Whether the negative index is the end or the beginning, it doesn't really matter. You can always think it's going to convert the negative index into positive. Any questions about this part? One more thing, okay? Sometimes you see people do this, going from 0 to 7 with a 2. So 3 things. What this means is, so I should write it out. A, B, S. This is where you start. This is where you end. And this is the step size. In other words, as you try to generate from A to B, that's what you should do in here. So for example, from 0 to 7 with a step size of 2. So the locations you're going to try to grab is 0, 2, 4. So you're going to see CE8 if you run something like this. So it allows you to control the step size. And the step size by default is 1. If you don't provide the step size, it's 1. But if you provide it, it's going to use your step size. Okay. Are there any questions? All right. So let's let me give you one last exercise, then we'll move on. How about this one? -1, -7, -1. What would I expect to see if you look at this one? I print it out from -1 to -7 with the step size of -1. Let me ask you all to vote. A is error. B is CSE-8A. C is something else. What would you say the output will be? Okay, so vote in. You don't have to run it, just think about this. Okay, which one looks right? Do I expect to see an error? Or something else, or just the original string? All right. We will stop the vote. We'll stop the vote. It looks like a lot of us saying A. In fact, it's going to be something else, right? So if I run it, you're going to see it's the reverse of the original string. It's A8-ESC. Why is this the case? Because we're going to start from -1, which is in here, go to -7 with a step size of -1. Step size of -1 is basically going left, right? So it's going to be -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, not including -7. So it's basically the reverse of the original string. Okay. Sometimes you can also do let me see. With going from -1 to the beginning, I think that this is probably the only thing we'll talk about here. I don't want to talk about anything fancy here. What would happen if it's just 1? I mean, this whole thing is just 1, then that is indexing. You're just looking at location 1, which is S. -1, -7, +1. Then there is a, so it will convert -1 into 5. -7 will be -1. And then you will go step size. I think this one would give you nothing in here. So if you change it into 1, 1 is changing into a +1, a positive value, which is 5. -7, you try to convert it into positive, it won't work. And step size is 1, you're going to the right. So it's going from location 5 to location -2. Sorry, to location -1 with a step size of 1, it won't happen. So there's nothing in there. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So this is indexing, okay? So if you understand indexing and slicing, you're gonna have an easier time when we try to process lists, okay? So the remaining time for today, which we have about 1 hour and 30 minutes, to look at lists, okay? So we're done with string slicing. Any lingering questions before we move on? And if you indeed have questions, look at this document. It will tell you like what it does. Okay. So like the indexing and slicing. Okay. Now, I didn't see any other questions. Last call for questions about slicing. Okay. So the last topic today is about lists. So list is a collection of items. Like string is a collection of individual characters. List is a collection of data. Some of the data in there are like whole numbers. Some of the data in there are strings. You just form a collection of things, and we use square bracket to create a list. So square bracket, as you can see, have several meanings. If you use it after a string, it's gonna give you the indexing or slicing. If you try to use it to create a list, then square bracket means list creation. So the way you create a list is the name of the list equals to square bracket, all the data separated by commas here. For example, okay, so my grades for the lab is 20, 33, 90. Okay. And then Christine grades is that, so her grades is much better than mine. But as you can see, this list would have 3 things. The 0th element is here. The first element, second element. So the positioning or indexing of list is very similar like strings. 0, 1, 2, it also give you negative indexes. This is -1, -2, -3. Just as for strings, you can do indexing and slicing. For lists, you can do the same thing. The only thing that you have to be considering in here is you want to make sure that lists do not necessarily contain the same type of data. In other words, I can create a list with some of data being integers, some data being floats, some of them being strings. Okay. But in this class, in general, our list will be like having the same type of data, like a list of all integers, a list of all strings, etc. So that's what a list is about. And a lot of times, lists are used to hold data, and our program is to process that list. Yeah. Any questions? All right. Let's look at some exercise in here. So I have this list. Students is Maggie, Tasnim, and Diego. And then I'm adding a list with another list. What would you say this one would give me? What's the length of the new students? So new students equals to students plus Alyssa and Wang. Vote in, please. What would you say? All right, we'll stop the vote. I think we have a strong consensus. The answer is C, right? So Maggie, Tasnim, Diego, and then Alyssa and Wang, they are all together now into a single list. When you add two lists, you have just merging the data together. So this one would have 5 things, okay? Now, how about this one? Constants, pi, e, gravity, square root of 2, and I'm doing this thing. Can you tell me what is going to be printed out in here? Think about it. Remember, indexing goes from 0. All right. Vote in, please. What is the right answer? So if you look at it, this list has 4 things. The length is 4, right? So length is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. So where is the location 2? 0, 1, 2, 3. Location 2 is 9.8. So C is the right answer. C is the right answer. Okay. There is one question. If new students, I think it is about the previous one. But let me ask, are there any questions in here about this question? And then we can go back and look at the previous one. Yeah. All right. So the question is, if this new student was not defined, if this thing is not defined, then you're going to see an error. You're going to see an error. Okay. So this variable, if it's the first time it appears, you cannot find its length. That's going to be an error. Okay. Any other questions in here? All right. How about this one? Constants, and then I'm doing this nesting, like, what does this even mean here, right? So the way you should try to think about it is going from the innermost location all the way out and see this kind of hierarchy. What will be printed out by this one? Okay, so vote in whenever you figure out the answer. All right. So most of us said E, index out the bound, and that is the right answer, right? So in here you have 4. The length is 4. You check this out. And this is indexing. Constants indexing into location 4. There is no location 4. The last element has an index of 3. So you're going to see index out of range. Okay, so just be very careful in here. Questions? So indexing may give you out of bound. Slicing may not. So if this is what I'm having, the 4 elements constant, what would you say this one would give me? Vote in. Okay. Constants 1 column. All right, so we'll stop the vote. A lot of us said D, right? From location 1 all the way to the end, and that's exactly what we're having here. So the answer is D. Okay. Any questions about this? I think we are doing good. Next thing, this slicing. What do you think would happen? Right, so vote in. Kind of the way that list slicing is similar, like in here. All right. So it looks like we disagree with each other on this one. A lot of us said, oh, it's going to see an error. Just like slicing in strings, if you slice in list, you do not necessarily end up with errors. So this one is definitely out of bound, right? 5 is definitely out of bound. But you're going to go from the beginning all the way to 5. If there are things that are beyond 5, beyond the end, you just ignore them. So the answer should be C. The answer should be C. Okay, there are no errors. There are no errors. Questions about this? So if you understand slicing, how about this one? 55 to 5555. What would you say the answer will be? You see, I didn't even give you an error choice. There are no, you cannot go wrong with slicing. It's slow though, so you got to be careful. All right, so the answer in here is a lot of us said E, and that's correct, right? So there's really nothing that you're gonna be able to slice out. So this one would just give you an empty list, okay? I think this might be the last exercise about list slicing. It looks like we're a little bit ahead of time. I think, yeah, we have like a few exercises. But let's finish this up and then we're gonna take a break. Now, if this is my TAs, for example, this is a list, and then I'm doing this thing. What would you say the output will be? What is the new list? So what does this one give me back? Let's work on this. All right, I think the consensus seems to be, ooh, we disagree. So a lot of us saying A or B. If you look at the voting result, like almost a tie, right? So 0 to 2, TA 0 to 2 would give me a vector of, give me a list of 0, 1, 2. Remember, not including 2. Hannah is not part of it. You're going to see Vanessa and Evil. Okay. And then 3 to 4. Remember, 3 to 4, this 4 is not included, the end point. So it's going to be A. A is the right answer, not B. Be careful. The ending point is not included. Okay. Any questions? All right. So let's take a break. I think we have a few slides. We may be able to finish like quite a bit early. We'll see. Okay, if we finish a little bit early, I can talk about the lab activities. So let's take a break. Come back 1 o'clock. Come back 1 o'clock, please. Break time. Yeah. And I will answer the question in the Zoom chat too once we come back. All right, folks, get ready to come back uh, in 1 minute. We'll get started in here. All right. So let's start in here. There is a question in the Zoom chat. If we do square bracket colon 2, TAs, what's going to happen? Is this 2 inclusive? The answer is no. The endpoint is never included. Okay. Whether you omit the beginning or not. The only exception is if you omit the endpoint, then it goes all the way to the end of the string, all the way to the end of the list, including the last thing. But if you include the endpoint, the location at the endpoint is never included. Okay. Any other questions about slicing here? All right. The next thing is about list membership. In other words, we want to check, is a certain thing in the list? You can also do the in operation on a string. So is a certain character in the string? Then in here, so you have primes, these are prime numbers. Is this thing in the primes and is this thing not in the primes? So not in means it's not a member of. Is this, what would this last statement give us? Is it true, false, or none? Let's do a quick vote. All right, keep voting in, please. Here. All right, we disagree with each other quite a bit. So some of us saying true, some are saying false. So 2 is in primes. This is 2, right? So 2 is part of this primes array. 13 not in primes. This, in fact, is also true, isn't it? 13 is not part of this primes list. So true and true should give me a true. We're not saying 13 is a prime or not. We're saying whether 13 is part of this primes list or not. So that's why you can look it up really quick, right? So the last thing, last but not least, is this index. So index basically is equivalent to find. So what index will do is, if this thing exists in the list, it's going to tell you where it is. It's going to give you the index. So what would you say this will print for me? A vote, and then we're going to try to do an exercise in here. Okay. So a lot of us saying C or A. Okay, let's stop the vote. So a lot of us said C and some of us says true. Index of is not a membership, right? Index of, so index in here tells you where 2 is. So where is 2? 2 is at the location 0. So this one would give me the index of 2. So C is the right answer. C is the right answer. Okay. So to summarize what we have in here, we talk about list, indexing, slicing, membership, find. There are many other things like the length of the list, the max of a list. So you can do a lot of operations on a list. You say, well, how do I know those operations? You can search up on Python documentations, right? So you can go to let me see, table of contents, sequence types. So this is a string methods. Sorry. We have lists. These are string methods. List. I don't think it's on this page. So here, data structures. So for list, you can do append, you can do many other operations. Okay. So it's not just like what we talked about. Let's do an exercise together. And then I think this is everything I prepared for today. If there are leftover time, which I think we will have some leftover time, we can talk about the lab from Wednesday and also answer any questions you may have. Now, let's write a function here, okay? So write a function that takes in a student ID, which is a list of IDs, and the list of the grades, and return the grade for the student ID. So there are 3 things it takes. Number 1, it takes the ID of a student, and they have a list of IDs and a list of grades. You're going to return the grade for the student. This is the prototype of the function. It's called lookup grade. You are given the ID of the student, and this is the IDs, this is the grades. So the IDs and the grades, they match. So for student with ID 10, the grade is A. For student with ID 30, the grade is B minus. So we call this parallel arrays or parallel lists. So values at the corresponding index, they kind of describe the data for the same subject. Given a certain ID, for example, I say 40, you are supposed to tell me it's B plus because that's the grade of the student. Can you write this code yourself? Let me see. Not in here. Where's the? It's not this one. Where's the add stamp side? Oh, there's the add stamp side. Okay. So let me go back to lessons. So here's the link to the exercise. Please do this. Okay. And give me a vote once you are done. And I want you to also consider the situation. What if I give you an ID and the IDs is not in this list of IDs? What should your code behave? right? So try to write it out. And obviously you're gonna need like index, right? Try to use index and also you have to think about other ways. You don't need a loop per se in here. For those of you who already know about loops, we're not using that as of now. Yeah. No one is done yet. Okay, but take your time. Try to come up with your approach. Since it's parallel array, if you know the location of the ID in the IDs list, the corresponding location in the grades list will tell you the grade of that student. You just need to give that back. All right, two of us are done. Three of us. Okay. We'll wait until like maybe around half of us are done. For those of you who are done, I want you to test. If you pass in an ID, let's say if you are given an ID that doesn't exist, your code should simply print out none. Okay, that's the expectation. Your code shouldn't crash. For those of you who say you're done, I want you to double check if your code actually can behave like that. About a quarter of us are done. Okay, take your time. Make sure you define the function. All right. Last minute, then we're gonna work on this together. Yeah. All right. Let's work on this together. So for this function, we're gonna, for example, we're gonna call lookup grade. And I may pass in like 40 and give you the IDs array, give you the grades array. And this one is supposed to give me the grade. I'll just print it out. So in this function, what I need to do is I need to first look for this ID. So I can say index equals to IDs dot index of student ID. So this tells me where this student is in the IDs list. And I'll just return the corresponding value at index. And that's it, right? If I run the code, say Python exercise.py, this will give me B+, right? Student ID 40 will have a B+. And this would work just fine. There's no problem. But what if I give you, say, like 80, student 80, I don't have this ID in here. What's going to happen to my code? If I run it, my code would crash. So, well, let me first tell you what these error messages really indicate. So you see a trace back, it means something bad has happened. But don't be afraid of this. You want to say, okay, my code crashed. And in general, the last line tells you where the error happened. So 80 is not in the list. Where do I know 80 is not in the list? You start looking for 80. Where is this? Say 80. 80 is here. So this thing is not in this list of IDs. And that's giving me the problem. In other words, my code would crash. The reason is simple. If this thing does not exist in the list, you're looking for the index, Python's index function would crash. How do I avoid it? You can use the membership function. You can do this. You say if student ID is in the IDs. You say, okay, if this ID is in there, and then I can just do whatever I'm doing. Else, well, if it's not in there, I just return none. That's it. This would work. Okay. So if I run it now, you're going to see the program would print out none instead of crashing. So this is kind of the usage of the member function in conjunction with the index function. Okay. Are there any questions about this? All right. So to summarize what we learned today, we covered quite a few things. The first thing is if-else statement with Boolean operators, right? So you should know those variations. The second thing is the slicing and indexing of strings. The last topic was lists and basic operations of lists. Are there any questions about any of these topics? We finished fairly early today. Are there any questions? I didn't see any questions in the chat. Okay. If there are no other questions, I think if you need to go, you can go. I will stay behind a bit and answer any questions you may have about the lab on Wednesday or the PAs. So if you have any of those questions, stay behind and I'll be happy to answer your questions. But other than that, you're good to go. So I will see you on the coming Tuesday. Okay. Looks like we can do more exercises this coming Tuesday. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Have a good day. But if you have questions, feel free to stay behind and I'll be happy to help you.